Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I ended up in this situation. Well, it all started the other day when... Okay, so it was actually years ago when I initially came across this ridiculously tricky but fun little hip challenge, and I fell in love with it for not only the challenge itself, but also because it requires a beautiful blend of multiple physiological components to complete the task. So to be mindful of your time, let's show you just how simple the concept of the challenge is, and then if you want to learn some fun little things about what the body needs to complete this task, then you can stick around and learn about general concepts involving movement strategies, hip and ankle anatomy, motor control, and proprioception. All right, let's not waste your time. Here is the challenge. Starting on your back, take your shoe and place it on the bottom of your foot. And from there, your challenge now becomes to roll over and return to the starting position without letting your shoe fall off. That's it. So have fun. Naturally, if that's all you're interested in, go and give it a try right now. But if you're gonna take off right now just because you're excited to try it, then please consider hitting the like button before you leave. And feel free to share this video with a friend who you think would enjoy the challenge. All right, with that being said, if you do want to geek out and learn some neat things about the human body, then keep on watching. All right, for the record, as we start to geek out here a bit, I do want to mention that I don't want you to worry if you can't complete this challenge. It's not the easiest task in the world, and I certainly had a number of failed attempts with each leg before my brain and body ultimately figured out the technique and I got my first successful attempt. Now, having come across this fun little challenge about 10 years ago or so, from a mobility standpoint, I will say it was certainly much easier for me back then than it is now. And I'd like to say that for the vast majority of us, this task only becomes more challenging as we age. And it's also important to keep in mind that the composition of the hip joint can actually vary to a notable extent from one individual to the next. So some individuals may be predisposed to this challenge being quite easy, while other individuals, even those who have completely healthy hips, may find it to be pretty much impossible. So that's just a little preamble to let you know not to get too hung up on this challenge if you can't complete it. Okay, so what specifically are we going to need to complete the task? Well, let's do a quick breakdown on the main components of what goes into being successful with this movement. Now, it's not a deep dive, but rather enough to skim the surface and perhaps get you interested in learning a bit more on your own if you find this stuff rather interesting, just like me. So starting out, in the grand scheme of things, to be successful with this challenge, your brain and body are going to have to come up with movement strategies, which in this context refers to a tactical approach regarding how you will need to move and control your body to successfully complete the task. And these movement strategies can be integrated in both a conscious and even subconscious manner. Movement strategies are an important concept and component of physical activity and movement rehabilitation. So if you're interested in the world of physical movement or injury rehabilitation, it's a good concept to be aware of. A great personal example for me with this challenge was when I was transitioning from rolling on my back to my stomach. So after a few failed attempts, I realized that I needed to aggressively crank my ankle into much more of an everted position than on my previous attempts as a means to keep the sole of my foot more parallel with the ground. I also realized around this time that I needed to internally rotate my hip much more throughout the back to stomach transition to also help the bottom of my foot remain parallel with the floor. And as I did this, I also began to realize that I needed to bend my knee more than I thought I otherwise needed to. And that was really all just the conscious aspect of it. And so I can only imagine how many subconscious movement strategies and adjustments my brain and body came up with to help complete the task. And if you try this challenge, then no doubt it'll be the same for you. All right, next let's tackle mobility. Mobility refers to the available range of motion of structures within the body and the subsequent ability to move freely. For this challenge regarding mobility, we can consider joints and muscles to be the tissues we're interested in. Yes, technically there's a bit more to it than that with some other structures, but we're not focusing on that for this video. So it'll likely come as no surprise to you that you'll need an ideal amount of hip mobility, both from the ball and socket joint and from the surrounding muscles that cross the hip. Inadequate mobility from either of these categories, which can arise for a variety of reasons, will limit the ranges throughout which your hip can move. As you transition onto your stomach, you'll need to turn your thigh inwards, which is known as internal rotation of the hip. Then, as you transition from your stomach to your back, you'll need to go into an externally rotated position. And these movements are achieved due to the head of the femur turning in the socket. And the hip joint is able to do this since it has what we call 3 degrees of freedom, with one of these degrees being for internal and external rotation. Chances are this internal rotation mobility will be the most common issue for most individuals out there who struggle with this challenge, which includes myself. Believe it or not, ankle mobility will play an important role in the success of this movement as well. Now, while the ankle has much more limited movement or range of motion than the hip, you'll still need to move it into specific positions to help keep the bottom of your foot balanced. On the transition to your stomach, you'll find that you'll need to evert your ankle, while on the transition to your back, you'll need to invert your ankle, which is the opposite of eversion. You'll also need to use varying degrees of what we call plantar flexion and dorsiflexion throughout the task. So all of that essentially means that while this challenge looks like a pure hip mobility challenge, you won't be able to succeed unless your ankle mobility is adequate as well. Now you can have all the mobility in the world, but if you lack the physical strength to hold your hip in the air and in certain positions throughout the movement, then you're out of luck. Now the good news here is that if you're otherwise healthy, this likely won't be an issue for you. The average individual has enough muscular strength around their hip and lower extremity to lift it off the ground and enough endurance to hold it off the ground for long enough to complete the task. So in that regard, I'm just gonna gloss over this component and move on to the next one. So here's where it gets a bit more nuanced and ultimately what I think is a bit more interesting. So mobility, strength, and muscular endurance don't really amount to much individually, because if we can't integrate these attributes together in a manner by which we can precisely control each of these components throughout the task, then we'll be unsuccessful. This is where the concept of motor control comes in. Motor control is the ability of the brain and central nervous system to initiate, direct, and grade purposeful, coordinated movements by integrating sensory information with the body and environment. Essentially, it's the brain and body interacting to produce goal-oriented movement. Now, like anything else, motor control is often something that we can get better at, such as when learning a new technique and skill, or in the case of this video, learning to roll over without letting your shoe fall off the bottom of your foot. So chances are that if you can't quite complete this challenge, with a bit more practice, your motor control will improve enough to allow you to become successful. Now, again, that's not going to be the case with everyone, but if you have otherwise healthy hips and just need to figure out how to complete the task, then you'll likely be successful. Regarding this topic of motor control, a great example of the integration between brain and body is during what I call the blind phase, where you're on your stomach and you can't look back at your foot. And so in this position, you need to rely on the ability to feel the position that your foot is in, not see it. I mentioned this term a lot in my other videos, but if you're not sure what it essentially refers to the body's ability to subconsciously sense the position and location that a part of our body is in without needing any visual input. And so if you can't feel the position of your knee and your foot, you'll have no idea if you're keeping either of them at an angle that allows your shoe to stay balanced on your foot. Proprioception is actually quite a big deal when it comes to successfully completing this challenge. And I'd say that it'd be pretty much impossible to do without it. So that is a super quick rundown of some of the fun concepts at play with a movement challenge such as this. Now there's lots more that I could have discussed, but hopefully you get something out of this brief little overview. I think videos like these are just super fun to make since it's fun to talk about some of the neat things that the body can do. Also, real quick, if you enjoy any of this content and you want to help support this channel, a like would mean the world to me, and you can certainly subscribe if you do want to stay up to speed on the content I'm putting out on this channel. And I do all of this myself. I film the content, I script it, I edit it, I do all of it, and it really is a labor of love. Yeah, I like being creative and doing all of it, but it's a lot to do, and without kind of having the budget to hire others, it certainly takes a lot of time and effort. So hey, if you appreciate any of that, feel free to like and again, subscribe if you don't want to miss any content I'm putting out here on the channel. All right, everyone. So with that being said, you know how it goes. Keep looking after yourselves, keep looking after one another, keep making great things happen, and I will see you in the next video.